In this part of the lecture, we're going to discuss Roman North Africa. Roman North Africa is a distinct culture from ancient Egypt, which was a different province in the Roman Empire. Egypt was influenced by Greek culture and was Greek speaking, but Roman North Africa, which is modern day Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco, it was much more influenced by Latin culture. And you can see on this map how close that part of Africa is, the part in the yellow, to Sicily and to Italy. And then if you or to imagine beyond the map to what we know as Spain and France, which were all Latin-speaking areas. So Roman North Africa was heavily influenced by Latin culture. As in Egypt, there are ties to the biblical period. Just as Apollos came from Alexandria and he was a man of great learning, we know from the New Testament of Simon of Cyrene. You can see from the map that Cyrene is a major city of in Libya, ancient Libya and modern Libya. And it was Simon who carried the cross of Jesus. We also know that Simon had two sons, Alexander and Rufus, who were almost certainly early disciples in the Christian movement. Now, Christianity didn't necessarily come through these men, but there was a large Jewish population in Cyrene, just like in Alexandria. And so likely Christianity came through that Jewish network, as it did throughout the empire. So there are ancient roots in North Africa for Christians. But like in Egypt, Christianity took a distinct form. I mentioned the Latin culture because it's a part of the Latin-speaking Roman Empire. But if you look carefully at this inscription below the Latin, you'll notice a strange-looking text. That's Punic. North Africa had been settled by the ancient Phoenician people. So there's a layer of Punic culture, and this is the same group of people that settled in Palestine. The Philistines in the Old Testament were also Phoenicians. And then there is a further layer of Berber culture, which is the indigenous African peoples who were there even before the Phoenicians came. So if you were to look at art and architecture, you would see Roman elements, as in the architecture of the city, the hippodrome. You would see Punic elements, as in this goddess, and you would see layers of Berber culture. Some of the first things we know about Christianity in North Africa was that it was persecuted. And so the North African Christians are known for their martyr stories. There are a number of early martyr stories, but one of the most famous is that of Perpetua and Felicity, pictured here. Perpetua was a young Roman woman of a good family who had become interested in Christianity in the early 2nd century. But it was at a time when there was persecution, and she, along with several other members of the church, were arrested. And what's interesting about her story is we actually have her own diary from the time that she was in prison. She was accompanied by Felicity, which was her servant, and Felicity was also a Christian. They died together in the arena after being attacked by wild animals and ultimately being stabbed to death. So the martyrs of North Africa, not only Perpetua and Felicity, but many more, they became examples, or what was known as saints, in the early Christian world, people who were willing to die for their faith. Martyrdom made a huge impression on African Christianity, which always, even after Constantine legalized Christianity, would render North African Christianity more intense in some ways than Christianity in other places. North Africa is also the home of Latin theology. So the man known as the father of Latin Christianity is Tertullian. Tertullian lived in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. Tertullian was a prolific writer and apologist for Christianity. Again, that's someone who defends the faith to non-Christians. He wrote many, many books, which were very popular in the 1st century and remain in print to this day. Among other things, Tertullian coined the word Trinitas, or Trinity. He also coined many other Latin words. So Tertullian is one of the most important leaders, intellectual leaders of the early church. Another great early Christian father is Cyprian, who was the bishop of Carthage in the 3rd century. And what really makes Cyprian stand out, he was also a brilliant writer and rhetorician. He had a classical education, which when he converted to Christianity, he used in his preaching and writing. But Cyprian was also known for his sanctity. He led the Church of Africa through a great pandemic or plague, which is now known as the Plague of Cyprian. And he also guided the church through a period of intense persecution in the 250s, in the year 250 and then in the year 258. Ultimately, Cyprian gave his life, even though he was the bishop, he was martyred. And so he was revered in the ancient times and still today as a great saint or martyr bishop. But it's Augustine of Hippo who casts the longest shadow of the North African theologians. You could easily say that Augustine is the most influential thinker in Western Christianity. That's true of Catholics and Protestants. Augustine was born into a Christian household. His mother was a Christian, but he resisted Christianity for his young life. And he tells the story of his dramatic conversion in the Confessions, which is sometimes called the first autobiography in the world. It's a story, or it's a book that is very well known, not only in Christian circles, but in literary circles, which testifies to Augustine's great ability, not only as a Christian thinker, but simply as a Latin stylist and as a humanist. Over the course of his 40 or so year career as a leader of African Christians, Augustine wrote thousands and thousands of pages of treatises and debates and sermons and biblical commentaries. He was extraordinarily prolific, but he was also involved in the controversies of his day. And so part of the reason he's so influential is because it's Augustine who sort of definitively described what the church is, what a Christian minister is, the theology of grace, the doctrine of salvation. Augustine spoke a word which has been respected ever since on some of these major theological topics. But above everything else, Augustine was a theologian who valued love. And here is a prayer from the Confessions, and it gives you just a little flavor of what Augustine was like. He prayed, "Give me yourself, O my God, give yourself to me. Behold, I love you, and if my love is too weak a thing, grant me to love you more strongly. I cannot measure my love to know how much it falls short of being sufficient, but let my soul hasten to your embrace and never be turned away until it is hidden in the secret shelter of your presence. This only do I know, that without you all to me is misery, woe outside myself and woe within, and all wealth but penury, if it is not my God." One of those controversies that Augustine was involved in was the Donatist Schism, and this was one of the last major events in Christian history in North Africa. What's significant about the Donatist Schism is that it is the first split within Christianity that was not over a doctrinal issue. We talked about the Coptic Christians who split over a Christology, a doctrinal issue, but the Donatists in North Africa split over practical issues. And this is another distinguishing factor between Eastern and Western Christianity. If Eastern Christianity is concerned with more heady, abstract, philosophical things, Western Christians tended to be more concerned with practical, more legalistic type issues. And so the Donatists and what became known as the Catholics on the other side, they split over questions of what the church is, what the Christian leader ought to be like, and questions of personal sanctity. Shortly after Augustine died, the Vandals from Europe sweeps through and conquers the land, which is then reconquered by the Greek Byzantines and then ultimately by the Arabs in the 7th century. And the Arabs begin gradually to Islamicize the area, and by the 11th or 12th century, Christianity has almost completely died out in North Africa. There's almost nothing left after the 12th century. We'll see a similar story in sub-Saharan Africa which is what we'll turn to next.